All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second workshop of the RIT Art Festival. This afternoon, we are joined by filmmaker Loch Phillipps and Tatjana Kulalic, a Bosnian refugee who appears in Loch's documentary Utica, The Last Refuge. In this session, they will share a few clips from the film and guide us through a conversation about representation of refugees in media. How does the media focus on the trauma suffered by refugees and their dramatic stories work for and against the ultimate goal of resettling them? How much agency do refugees have in how they are portrayed? How can we do a better job of helping them live safer and more productive lives? They will tackle all of these questions in the next hour and a half, and we hope you take this opportunity to bring your own questions and perspectives to the discussion as well. Founder of Off-Ramp Films, Loch has been filmmaking for 30 years. He worked as the primary editor for UNICEF in New York, and from there he moved into shooting and producing, traveling widely. His work for international organizations has been televised from China to Brazil and on CNN International. More recently, Loch has been working with the multiple Emmy-winning production company, Hock Films. He's currently co-directing a short film in Western Pennsylvania with a recently arrived Burmese refugee, Hong Sar Man, and collaborating with the Rockefeller Institute to produce a series of short films on refugee resettlement in upstate New York. Tatjana was born in Bosnia and Herzegovina as a result of the conflict that engulfed former Yugoslavia in 1992. She fled with her family to neighboring Croatia. She was granted refugee status and arrived in the United States with her family in December of 1998. Originally resettled in Columbia, Maryland, the family moved to Utica in upstate New York in 2000. That was where she found employment with a center formerly known as the Mohawk Valley Resource Center for Refugees. There she works as the coordinator for immigration and citizenship, helping refugees navigate residence issues in the citizenship process. So with that, I would like to turn the floor over to Loch and Tatjana. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Chris. Good to see you here. I just want to say from the outset that I by no means suggest that I'm an expert in refugees or anything. You know, I'm just a filmmaker. And to give you some idea, when I started shooting my film in 2017, Donald Trump had just come into office and immediately dropped the numbers. And I had made several films for International Rescue Committee before this, and we were very interested in refugee resettlement because we saw that the system is backed up and we see that refugee resettlement really works. There's a lot of data that supports this, but I did not know that the president unilaterally sets the number. So that gives you some idea of my naivete. So there are some serious experts in the audience here, and I'm hoping to have a conversation rather than a lecture because I'm not a professor. So I have Tatjana with me, and I guess I'd like to start off by asking people what you guys think a refugee is. Anybody have anything they want to say about that? Chris knows what a refugee is. Yeah.
Someone seeking refuge.
No, go ahead. No, talk into the mic, please, because I got to hear you on the Zoom part.
Someone seeking refuge, someone seeking a place a safe space.
Yes, that's true. But I think we want to differentiate between refugees and asylum seekers and other kinds of immigrants.
I guess from my perspective as being a refugee, to me, a refugee is someone who was forced out their natural homes and relocated to a third country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true too. But I think really importantly, from my perspective, a refugee is someone who's been given a legal status and a path to citizenship. I mean, Tatjana, you want to add anything here?
So about refugees, I want to say that there is no illegal refugees. There is a lots of time people have misunderstanding about refugees. They are saying that they are illegally in United States. They want to kick them out, but the refugees are processed outside, recognized by UNHCR, United Nations High Commission for Refugees. The group is recognized by them, and then they get the access to register for program for resettlement in third country. The refugees are people who are unable to go back to the country or to their original country because of the fear of persecution, because of the war, because of the natural disaster, because of religious persecution, because of some different type of persecutions. So when they are approved to come to United States, refugees coming legally, they are lawfully admitted at the port of entry into United States. So people ask many times, as a refugee, what did you bring when you are coming here? What did you bring with you? You know, what kind of stuff? What do you have memories, memorabilia that you are bringing or anything? I think I have refugee experience. The most important thing that we are bringing with us is that plastic white IOM bag. It's the bag from International Organization for Migration, which is the division of UN. In that bag, we are bringing our legal documents, medical papers, promissory note. When we are entering United States, we are legally entering US, we are employment authorized, we have right to remain in United States, to work in United States, and we have right to go through the adjustment process after 1 year of being in United States. We have right to apply for permanent resident status. That's for green card. People always say green card document. That's actually adjustment process to get permanent resident status, which will lead us to our US citizenship. So in that plastic bag, we also have promissory note. I'd like to say about that promissory note, because lots of people have misunderstanding about the refugees, that we are coming and getting money from the government and getting everything for free. Promissory note is the document, it's the paper that we signed, that we are promising that we will return money for plane ticket that was paid for us, basically. So as soon as we step at the US soil, we are in debt, okay? So approximately 6 months after arriving in United States, we start to receive papers from BOLAG agency, invoice that we need to start paying back the loan. And that is okay, but we just want to clarify that we don't get things for free. We very much take care of ourselves and try our best to become productive people in this society during our life in the United States. Okay. Do you have any questions? Any questions?
Well, there's a ton of data that says they are indeed very productive citizens. And I think what we saw in Utica was that they basically saved this small city. So I think for me, it was really important because so I made this film as a corrective in some ways. So you have this small minority of people in the United States who are vehemently anti-immigration and anti-refugee resettlement. They make a ton of noise. And there's a lot of people, a majority of people who are for refugee resettlement and for immigration writ large, but they don't have the same passion. So this small group is making a ton of noise. So what I wanted to do was say to people who vaguely understand that refugee resettlement is a really good idea, here's why you should be super passionate about it. And here's why you should meet those guys at that level of passion. And I like to think my film did that. I don't know if anybody here has seen the whole thing, but that was the goal. And I felt like there's a lot of stories, like I watched a documentary on Frontline, and I've seen a lot of stories about refugees, and we really get into the traumatic aspects of their past. And if you focus on that, you might come away with the idea that these guys are going to be PTSD ridden. They might not make the best neighbors, but that in fact is not true. So we really tried to put that in there and be honest about refugees are coming from these kinds of traumatic pasts, but not say that that's who they are. They're not defined by that trauma. And these guys are a real contribution here. So with that, I'd like to ask Tatjana to tell a story. She had an early encounter with the media here, and it was...
Yeah, when we arrived in 1998, around the new year, so we were first officially resettled Bosnian refugee family by the agency, the small agency. So it was like pilot program. So the agency, they connected newspaper with the journalists. So the journalist is supposed to come to start writing article about us. So my first encounter with the journalist was, I was at home and I know that she's coming with the interpreter. My language was much, I was not that fluent as I'm now, but even now it's learning process. It's going to be forever a learning process. And when I opened the door, she said, hi, and then she said, you don't look like a refugee. So that's kind of something that really struck me. What does that mean? How do you look? What's the way how you expect refugee to look like? Are there a model of the refugee? Is that what media is always showing, you know, the poor Bosnian woman with the scarves, with the muddy rubber boots and all of that? Is that what everybody wants to see? Or is it something else? What kind of, how the refugee really look like? A few nights ago, we watched a movie at a college, the movie that Loch made.
Annual college.
Yes, Emmanuel College. And my friend from Boston, who is not refugee, was sitting next to me and watching the movie. And she said to me, oh my God, all these refugees who are just coming at the port of entry and entering US, because you were showing them, they all look so sad, with the sad faces. And I said, well, that's how it is. We have no reason to look differently probably at that moment, because you are going somewhere that you have no idea where you're gonna end up, literally. So, but what do you think? What is your opinion about how refugees look like? How do you see refugees? What do you expect when you see the refugee? What do you expect to see?
We could really use some feedback here, because as a filmmaker, you're operating in the dark and you want to know what people think refugees are.
I think now more than ever, because of how the Ukraine war has played out and the kind of journalism that we are seeing on refugees, it's more like, you know, these guys are European, they aren't the typical refugees, you know, and that's why you should be giving them refuge, because they aren't what you think they are. So clearly the world does think a certain way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Can you go a little deeper on that? Then what do you think? So if you are saying that Ukrainian refugees aren't typical, what is typical?
No, for the media coverage you've seen, the typical refugees for them are people from the Middle East, I would say, from Afghanistan, from Syria, because that is where the main dispute has always been, and they're the ones looking for refuge. But suddenly now a different country, which is mostly white people, want refuge, and that's a novelty in their eyes, and that is something which has never been associated with what refugees have been in their eyes. So yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The racism undercurrent in this whole issue is really strong. We do address that a little in the film. Well, I think at this point, I'm just going to show you guys a scene from the film. So let's show Nazardine.
There's a question.
Oh, got a question? Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a kind of a related comment. And this is something I teach classes on migration, and this is something that we talk about in my class, which is the danger. It's complicated, right? But the danger of falling into this dichotomy between good migrants and bad migrants, or good refugees and bad migrants, or immigrants in general, right? And so I think as those of us who want to advocate on behalf of migrants and refugees, we need to be careful not to fall into that as well. So these are the deserving people, unlike the ones you assume are not deserving, and more of to challenge that whole narrative.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, let's watch this scene. This is Nazardine being trained to ride the public bus.
Yeah, bush, just bush, yeah. That's it. بعدين أخذه طلعة أو ها هي ممكن إنه ترميه بالجاربج أو yeah.
Please move away from the doors.
Hi, good morning. My name is Victoria, and today I'm going to be showing you how to ride the Central bus. If you're not sure where you're going or where to get off the bus, you can always ask the driver. They're very knowledgeable.
لما تقولون إنه أنتم
This is a big city for the Africans. It's a big city, Utica. And they have different buildings, very tall. In my area, we don't have this kind of buildings like this.
So if you're waiting for a bus, you need to stand next to these blue bus stop signs. We're going to stop here for
We build the house by ourselves, the grass house. We made the soil and some grass on it. You can use your hand, everything, to make it smooth. It's a nice house. Rain coming, everything coming, nothing inside. It's dry. That's what my life was.
And it's important to distinguish between refugees and other immigrants. Some immigrants have choice, and refugees are people forced to leave their home countries. And in that perspective, they leave everything they have behind.
So in this scene, this is actually the first time that Nasruddin speaks in the film, and you've seen the first couple of days here where he's coming into the refugee center and going through some paperwork, and he's being trained in how to use a stove in his house. So Nasruddin comes from a very rural part of Sudan. So I just wondered if anybody could tell me what this scene made them think about and give me some feedback on this scene. Yeah.
Thank you. I thought the selection to highlight them learning how to use the bus and what I was assuming was a service provided to the center was really powerful, because it's just not something that we as people who use public transportation on a daily basis take that step back and think what it would be like. So I wonder if in the film you had other examples of kind of things that Americans wouldn't assume need to be taught. And also like so that we could help participate in that integration experience.
Yes, yeah, we have a lot of that. We're really embedded at the center, so it was kind of showing him go through the process of some kind of assimilation. I mean, I actually hope that refugees don't assimilate, because as you'll see later, Nasruddin has a lot of ideas and some that are critical of the US, which I really appreciate. But for me, it was a big question. Like, I wanted you to know that he lived in a grass hut and he liked it. You know, that was really important for me, is for you to know that we look down on that kind of thing. Americans are just like, are you kidding me? He had a dirt floor in his house. You know, it's like really, you know, Americans freak out about stuff like that. But I wanted you to know how much he liked his life. And so that was really important for me to include. And I want, you know, to give him some agency in the film. So that was an important part of that. Anything else? Let's see. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, it appeared as though he had some type of community supporting him and explaining a lot of the new things he was experiencing in Utica. And there's a book by Valentino Achak-Deng and Dave Eggers called What is the What, that also focuses on the lost boys that were resettled from South Sudan. And in that book specifically, they did not have a community to rely on. So I think there's a pretty stark difference in the experiences that these two people from Sudan would face.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's several organizations in UNICEF, I mean, in Utica, that are really good at helping these guys.
I was just going to add on to that, you know, Utica, we were talking about this earlier, how, you know, refugees really, you know, revitalize the city. But at some point, we also have to look at, you know, even though we revitalize the city, what can the city do for us that will make that assimilation a little bit better? Because when we came to Utica, like I said, we, you know, with what you stated before, we had to, you know, pay back the plane ticket and all that stuff. But I felt like assimilating to the culture, especially for my parents, was a little bit harder than it could have been better.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the amount of money that the I mean, one of my big beefs with the refugee orgs is they won't push back on the government very much. Like the inclusion of Donald Trump as an antagonist in this film is really a problem for a lot of the refugee orgs who don't want to bite the hand that feeds them. And so there's two ways that you could push back on the presidency. One is bring bigger numbers, and two, give more money to these resettlement agencies to help smooth the process of resettlement. And I don't know, I don't see a lot of activism going on that front. Question?
We're the wrong shoes.
I think it's difficult in creating a film like that to also, I think, problematize the question of again, what was being said about like good and bad immigrants and refugees in terms of like productivity in the United States. That narrative of like refugees being, working immediately and being productive members of society is also gets into that idea of like the grateful refugee or the like, and so I don't know in the film like how that's brought into question, or I think it's hard to do to have that both and narrative in a film that's also advocating and also
Yeah, I know that's so another point of embarrassment for me about the film is that it really is delivered within a capitalist construct, because I feel like that's who I'm speaking to at the end of the day. And refugees are this amazing addition. There's a guy from Fiscal Policy Institute told me that they can't show causation, but no urban center in the United States has ever rebounded from an economic down without a strong immigrant population. So they can't say that that's causing the rebound, but these guys are, I mean, you see it over and over again. And a lot of the employers in the Utica area told me, like, look, one guy at a bread company said, a lot of the locals here are so drug addled and whatnot that we don't know who's going to show up for any given shift. Suddenly we have these refugees coming in, they show up, they work hard, they're totally reliable. And this changes our entire workforce. And you do get the feeling like when I went to college, when I graduated from Hamilton, Utica was at its low point. And you would talk to people down there and they would say something like, if I don't get out of here, my life is over. And refugees are showing up going like, great, where do we start? So it's a different attitude.
I just want to point out as well, when we are coming to United States, we are coming with basically nothing. Everything is left behind. So there is nothing to lose anymore. So we are coming with our lives, our culture, our work habits, our education. Those are primarily values that we have, that we bring with us. And that promise, that bag as well, yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning. So with the strong work ethic, most of us, we want to reach at least level that we had before we left our own countries, okay? We didn't come from nowhere. Even for Azain, he had this hut, but that was his house. And that was his pride, something that he was proud and that he liked it. So he wants to achieve at least that, okay? Some other had high education, had lots of back in their own country, and they work hard to achieve at least that level of security. So that's why I think we have different work ethic when we start working and our life here. And what we want is peace and freedom and future for our children. I'm parent of a child, you know, and I don't see for myself that I want to go back to school to achieve things, but for kids, it's something that must be done for the future to continue where we stopped once before. It's just human desire. It's not just for refugee, probably everybody, every human will have that kind of desire if it's healthy and can continue with the life.
As I was saying before, I guess what I'm not saying, because I don't want to sound ungrateful for the situation, right? Obviously I am, but I felt like I was put in a very lucky situation. With what you were saying before, like my parents are one of the hardest working people I know. Like we came to America with 9 of us, so 7 kids. And so they sent all of us to a daycare center where in the daycare center, Thea Bowman, which is actually depicted in the video that you, the clip that you showed.
Yeah.
That was where I was raised up. And, you know, I grew up with a lot of other refugee populations, Bosnian kids, a lot of African kids, immigrants, kids that are in single family households, a lot of kids that are underprivileged. So growing up in that environment though, and receiving awards and incentives for doing what we had to do, like our homework and stuff. And every summer we would go to, Boston, New York City, big field trips, and they award us for that. And growing up as a kid, having all those memories really, shaped me as a person. And I just wish there were more programs like that, not just in Utica, but everywhere,
Hi, Loch. Thanks so much for this. I'm really curious in your role as a filmmaker, which is one of the most powerful media we have out there. It's easy, I think, to preach to the choir, right? To what extent do you think that people who watch your movie are already advocates for refugees? I would say probably a very large percentage, right? But then what messages how can you cross over to engage with the non-supporters of refugees and migrants in the US? How can film and your kinds of film, and your skills at this, get us out, out of this, crossing over to reach the people who need to be convinced? What messages have you, figured out? How can we do that?
That's very tricky. I mean, in that passion gap comment I made earlier, that really is my stance, is that in actuality, you don't reach across the political aisle very often. Like I don't know if you've spent a lot of time around big Trumpers and things like that, people who are really anti-immigration. I don't even think they watch documentaries. So, I mean, I don't think you're going to do that. I think you send a ripple down the political line and you're trying to create some passion. You could reach the middle, but I don't think you reach the other side exactly. But I'm really bent on trying to raise the level of passion for refugee resettlement, which seems entirely uncomplicated and not dubiously successful to me. And just say, this is, I think we need to know things that we do right. And so a lot of this film for me is showing a systematic kindness that's delivered to people that helps them get resettled, and how Utica comes together to make this happen. And you see in Utica that it is a bipartisan issue. Like the Republicans there, it's so successful they can't even really say that it's bad anymore. We do have a scene at the end of the film where there was a protest. Trump came to support Claudia Tenney, and there's a protest scene, and there were 60 Trump supporters and maybe 1,000 people against Trump on the other side of the street. And those 60 protesters are super loud, and you see that, how passionate they are. But I went over and interviewed them, and 2 out of 3 of them said, look, these guys are here legally. We have no problem with that, because it's so obvious in Utica how well it's worked. So I did try to say that it's bipartisan there.
And I want to say just one thing, how to change. Maybe just if you talk to people individually and give the facts, and if you help one person to start to understand that story about refugees and how we come here, it's different than what they used to think before, it's a big deal, because one by one, you can change maybe somebody's opinion based on the facts about the refugees. So learning who are refugees, how they are coming, because I am a refugee, and I had chance several times to talk to people, Americans who are from totally different side of story. And when I told them the facts, how we are recognized, how we go through the process, how we come here, and what we do here, they started having softer tone about the refugees. So maybe that one-on-one is also very important. We are all humans. When you are in a group, it's a different story. When you are one-on-one with somebody, it's much more place to talk to person.
Hey, I just want to add a perspective, threading our 2 sessions together. One is I totally empathize with the how do you get people to watch your film or hear your stories if you're not already in the choir. We certainly, when we were doing suitcase shows, I believed like you bought a ticket if you cared about immigration, and hopefully you'd learn more about it. But what we're having success in now is that schools are bringing the program into schools so that students who may not want to sit in an audience to hear a story of an immigrant does, like BR, but also companies are, and that's been the biggest shift. So companies are bringing in, as part of D&I initiatives, employees, and I'm coaching employees to tell their stories so that their employees know each other. That's one thing. The other thing I just wanted to offer, because I was hearing this talked about, is we have to be really careful when we choose our stories, again, to say things like, and I worked in Utica and I worked in Lewiston, this happened in both places. There was the article of the city that loves refugees, right? The Utica article that was famous. And in Lewiston, there was the city that was saved by refugees for Lewiston, Maine. If you think about that as someone who's not pro-immigrant, you've just basically alienated them again, even though your intent is so good. But what happened in Lewiston was, when the article came out, people were pissed. They're like, wait a second, we were hiring the newcomers. We're the ones that stuck around to keep the city alive. So you got to think about, how do you reach them? And it's not with that kind of language.
Guilty on that front. Yeah.
Yeah. So my question actually goes along with hers pretty well. So I'm actually from Utica, and I'm part of the host population that, that whole narrative of, yeah, they have really revitalized the city. But I'm curious if you think that pushing that one narrative, we kind of forget the ways in which Utica has really failed a lot of refugees as well. We're putting them in the houses where sinks are emptying into buckets. There's lead in all the houses that we're resettling them into. Schools, underfunded and like that. So I'm curious, yeah, if we just push that one narrative, even though it's really great and the advocacy is really great and it's true, what else are we missing in just pushing that one?
Yeah, so this is why I was nervous coming here, to be honest. It's because I know this is a very high-end crowd, and your expectations, you guys know this whole landscape. A film is, I don't know if you've ever seen a novel turned into a film. Films are much more simplistic, and really I tried to portray a pretty simplistic thing. I couldn't get into all the nuances, but I think that hopefully you see this film and you would come away thinking, you know what, we need to do more for these people. We should be giving more money per refugee. I think a resettlement organization could show this film and show it as an argument for more money for the federal government, more local support. Certainly businesses could chip in more. Like, what kept the refugee center alive a lot during Trump years was people like Chobani gave them a butt ton of money. So I just don't think we can do everything. Like, if you get too bookish, nobody's going to watch it. And I do have a scene in here with Paul Hagstrom, who's an economist who did a study, and it's mostly on the economics, but he did study the refugee population and ask them what they liked about Utica. And they talk about a lot of stuff, and it's very interesting stuff. And that comes later in the film. I don't have that one with me today to show, but I tried to get into some of the nuances, but I also just tried to show this process of this Sudanese family doing this and Utica as a whole embracing refugees. So it's tricky. Some stuff is maybe better in a book. Yeah.
Well, I just want to give you a positive statement in terms of preaching to the choir. The choir needs to hear the good song too. Every now and then, we need to hear the good cheer, keep us going.
Yeah.
So never lose sight of that too.
Yeah, I mean,
keep the audience that
we had a
keep
woman,
us and get live and engaged and feel supported, hearing the goodness that is happening. All that, there's tremendous value in that component to help support
I hope
those who are in the
everybody's
field.
listening
Keep
to
going.
this. It's true, like guys like Chris who does this work, I wanted them to watch my film and to feel like I'm doing heroic stuff, because I really think it is, it's hard work that, and there's anyway, let me show you another scene. How about we show Naz has a car accident? Sorry.
Oh shit! It's snow.
on 28, December 28. I have a other student. Now I want to go to pick the medicine from pharmacy to Nasrin. I have no license. I call everyone to come and help me. No one answer my phone. I hit it this side, see? The car stuck here. I didn't see in my left hand. And she is here near to me. The cars crashes each other and called for police. Police came and gave me 2 tickets. The one of no license and the one of entering to the that's terrible. I was thinking they want to send me back to Africa.
There are things that happen in early resettlement, even little infractions, maybe with a traffic ticket or something, that could come around and hurt them at the time that they apply for citizenship. We really have to work with folks to make sure that they understand the law, that they're not doing things that are illegal or that are going to harm them or their community without them being aware of it.
My wife, she cried. She didn't sleep. All 2 days she don't eat. She's crying. I talked to her that it's my mistake by my fault. I can't get a mistake again. Make sure, but you have to be patient, no problem. That's everything from the God hand.
So there's a few subtleties in this scene. One is if you know refugee resettlement, you know that they're being paid to watch over Nasruddin for 3 months, and this is 10 months in. So you see that they continue to be engaged with him. But I wanted to ask you guys how you feel about showing him making a mistake. Any thoughts on that?
I liked it. I think it's critical to Professor Burgess's point about the good and the bad migrant and these stereotypes. I think good people make mistakes too, and giving a more nuanced portrait of a human being, their flaws, when they mess up, I think that ultimately makes them more relatable. And I think that if people can see themselves, I'm speaking, American citizens can see themselves in refugees, that's when the work gets done. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
I also wanted to add, having just seen the movie Emmanuel the other night, it was another way to show how something that would be mundane for us or ordinary is a big deal for them. And, you know, it really hits you when he says he thought he was going to get sent back to Africa, and you realize something that probably all of us have been through, for him, he can't afford to repeat that.
Yeah, Nasruddin, he was really embarrassed and didn't want to talk about this on camera at all.
I think this goes back to a comment earlier too about the different narratives and how are we missing that narrative of how are we not supporting them and what are other things that we're failing. And I think this highlights some of the challenges. What I took away from it was, you know, he had choices he had to make, and he had to get a medication for his daughter, and he was not receiving help to get it. And he had to make this decision to, you know, drive a car without a license, which is now going back to his point, you know, that is going to follow him potentially, or it could. And, you know, I think that point of privilege for us that, you know, we can just go and get in our car and it's not going to be an issue. So yeah, I think that highlighted that aspect of it.
This is very similar to previous points, but just the like pressure to be that perfect refugee, and that like I've scraped my car on things all the time, and like it doesn't, my citizenship isn't threatened, but like if they make the tiniest mistake, then that could literally threaten their ability to have a life in this country. And that is just so like fundamentally unfair. So I think it was really important to see that not only do these things happen, but that they have a far greater impact that is outsized to what it should be.
Yeah, I think the other thing is I feel the importance of providing like just right information for refugees, because even not only for refugees, but for, every like one of us, when it comes to like legal issues, things you need to talk about with lawyers, those are a very expertise field that not like a lot of people don't have the knowledge. And when you have a gap in those, informations, and sometimes you get just anxious if you don't get the right supports. And for refugees, I think those are the value that all of these organizations are working on, that's the value of service that they're providing.
Yeah, how much can you give them all at once?
Yeah.
I think as well that I thought it was important that you put the timestamp of the 10 months, that you mentioned that it really draws out that it's not just they've crossed the border, they're here, and then all is well, that this kind of continues, and almost a full year later, there's still a lot of anxiety and a lot of just uncertainty around it. So I think it's important to include that.
It's not just 1 year. The anxiety and unknown is going on for a very long time. I'm here 22 years, 23, and there are still areas that I'm afraid of if something happens. But imagine the kids, the new arrivals who are coming with the kid, they are traumatized, they are coming, the kids are starting school. Sometimes they don't know how to cope with the trauma and all of that. They end up at the doctor's office, they put the kid on medicines, the parent said no, and the parent doesn't know where that no is gonna lead him. It could lead to child protective service, it could lead to some legal issues and all of that. So it's a lot to cover for agency who is resettling refugees for all different aspects: school, legal, mental health, jobs, how to behave at work. We were having employment, one of the departments at the agency, employment department, that they were getting before information calls from the employers who will say, okay, this refugee, they will give the list of name, tell them that they need to take a bath and use the deodorant, because we smell them sometimes. That was before that we were having those situations. So it's that education and instructions goes from personal hygiene in some cases to legal issues. So it's a lot to cover.
Yeah.
I was really happy, like Nikki said, that you brought this up. It shows how you can make a mistake and stuff like that. And it's so interesting because just, I think 2 weeks back, I was in New York and I was driving and I got pulled over by the cops. And I was like, okay, my visa is going to be taken away. I'm not going to be able to study anymore in the US. And I just can't imagine what he must have been going through. I know I probably was overthinking, and I tend to do that, but it definitely did cross my mind that this can be a possibility.
Yeah.
So,
We had a later scene in the film, which we took out, where Nasruddin is sitting down with Abdel Shakur, who's also Sudanese and works at the center. And he's applying for a job. And Abdel Shakur is telling me, you got to put the accident on your application. You got to admit this, because it was a delivery job or something like that. And Nasruddin's like, no, I'm not putting that on there. It'll make me look bad. And Abdel Shakur is telling him they're going to know anyway. Like, and for him as an African to start to understand that the record keeping here is so exacting that what you do follows you everywhere you go. You can't just go and reinvent yourself in another place. You know, you're building a track record. And it was from there that he sort of started to understand, oh yeah, and keep a job maybe for a year, even if you don't like it, just because it looks good on your resume. Those kinds of things is really, you know, it's a lot for them to understand.
One more thing just to mention about, the new arrivals. After 1 year of being in the United States, they're eligible to apply for green card. I do paperwork. I'm the person who, they come to me and I'm doing that job. And many times we have situations that client has some legal issues. Sometimes the client doesn't want to disclose that. And then that could be harmful down the road because the USCIS, the government, based on the fingerprints, they will find everything about you in your background. So we are trying really hard to encourage people as soon as they arrive, stay away for trouble with the law. Don't commit crimes. It may hurt you down the road when you are applying for green card or when you are permanent resident, when you are going through the citizenship process, if you are going to apply, or if you will ever be able to apply for citizenship if you have some criminal issues.
I wonder if we could show the Nada Health Center visit scene.
Parts of my body that I'm not super in love with, but I feel like I work hard to get to where I got to for that cover. So I was like, you know what, I did my best, and this is like who I am. So you gotta be proud of it.
And does she have insurance yet? Or new arrival. Okay. No.
All right, this is kind of a small room, so you sit here. She could leave her shoes on. Okay, this has information about what I'm going to be talking to you about. It's in English, I'm sorry, but there's a nice handbook and there's some other information in there. So you've only been here a month? What country did you come from?
من أي دولة جيتي أنتِ؟
أثيوبيا.
بس أنتِ دولتك إيش؟ السودان؟ Yes,
Sudan.
She's from Sudan, but she came from Ethiopia.
Oh, is that? Oh, I don't know that name.
In Africa, I think.
Okay, so I have to let you know, today's visit is just me. The next visit, and every visit after today, will be with a doctor. We do not have female providers in this practice. All the doctors you'll see and the doctor that'll deliver your baby are men. So any objections? Are you okay to do that?
عندك أي شيء أنت عندك عادي تعملي هذا الشيء؟ No.
Okay, no objection.
No.
Okay. Every time you come here, we'll have an interpreter, but if something comes up and you think you need to be seen, you can come in and we'll interpret with the phone language line, so you don't have to wait for your next appointment. Do you have any questions?
عندك أي سؤال؟
No. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
أيوة هاجة لهنا ولا شيء. الملابس ذاته ما جبناه للناس.
So I'll meet you up at the window, okay?
لا ما عندي أي زول هنا. ما في أي زول صار هنا من عارفه.
Oh, and this is the vitamins and irons that the nurse discussed in the room.
يعني عندهم معاملة سمع والضيافة بتاعهم ذاته سمع. أنا فرحان. ما بصدق.
Any Muslim women here? Want to comment on that scene? Any chance?
Well, I'm surprised she agreed to a male doctor.
Are you really?
I am. I'm
Really?
really surprised. Absolutely.
I think she probably, we showed this scene to show probably how little agency she feels like she has. And to be honest, that was probably true with us as well. Like we were in shooting them, she was pretty reluctant in what we were doing. Eventually they didn't want us to shoot outside because we were making them stand out in a Sudanese community where they were trying to fit in. And Nasruddin always liked us. It was not a problem with him, but with her, it was much tougher. And I wanted to show that scene to show that, yeah, that she probably feels like she has no control for anything.
So she did tell him, and what did he say? Do we know that part?
She did say that
Her
again?
husband, does he know that she was going to have a male doctor?
I don't know about that. Yeah. I mean, it was really hard to get any interviews with her in general. It was really tricky for us. And hold on. Wait for a mic. Yeah.
I'm sorry. The interpreter didn't really mention that the doctors are male.
Oh,
But
that's
I'm not sure if all of it was.
right. That might be the editing, to be
Okay,
honest.
okay.
Yeah, because we're working with trying to make the scene flow. Yeah, if you speak Arabic, you probably catch us in some.
But I think also she understands and she respects that they're helping her and she will agree to the circumstances.
Yeah. I think Baliga's pretty cool, so I think she probably did say that. Anybody else? I mean, that was, I don't know. We just felt like it was a pretty poignant scene in that way. All right.
So for me personally, this is a really uncomfortable scene to watch because it is such an intimate thing to go through. And then you were in the room, she clearly doesn't understand what's going on. And I think even in the interview, when she says she's happy, it's one thing to see the subtitles and hear the voice, but it doesn't look like she's happy to give birth here, or that she's happy, period. So I just wonder, as a filmmaker, I mean, it's clear then you were aware of this sort of lack of agency and, so how do you then navigate that? I mean, you went ahead and shot this scene. So can you talk a little bit more about the choice? Why decide to go through with it? And yes, how do you navigate other scenes? Because I'm sure there are other people too that maybe didn't feel so comfortable. And I understand that in filmmaking, sometimes you do go forward because the story is just really important. I don't know about this one. I haven't seen it in the context of the whole film. The scene just on its own seems like really uncomfortable for me personally to watch. So if you can just talk a little bit more about that.
Well, at that point, we weren't really aware. So at that point, we had pretty decent amount of cooperation from them. And we had Abdel Shakur had explained to them the context and what they were doing for the wider issue of refugee resettlement, that they were going to be part of something, and just to trust us on that. And she had not voiced any objection at that point. And yeah, we just wanted to show like that they have these early interactions with the medical system here and stuff like, I don't know. Yeah, we didn't have any objection at that point. So, and I think Adam, the cameraman, was only one person in the room with them. I wasn't in there. And he said, yeah, that felt uncomfortable for sure. So, but we felt, there are some things like, it gets really dicey because you're trying to address a wider issue than maybe they understand. And I'm not going to say that I'm completely without some arrogance about my philosophical position. I mean, I feel like ultimately this film is going to do good for the refugee community, and they probably have taken a bump or two to help us get there. But I think everyone who sees the film really likes them. So I don't think anybody comes away thinking that any of the refugees who are in this film are not cool. I mean, Tatjana is a really interesting example for me because she was among the several refugees who originally said, no, don't shoot me. And maybe you could talk a little bit about why you changed your mind. You're on.
Yeah, first when they came, when the director introduced the crew and said they're gonna do documentary about us, and in every resettlement agency is always when outsider comes inside, it looks like chaos, total chaos. Everybody running around doing something, but at the end, everything is kind of well-oiled machine. Job gets done. So after several months, I started thinking, okay, if somebody else gonna tell the story about us, it's not fair, because how can you feel my own pain that I felt in some moment or some other feelings? So we are the ones who really need to tell the story. We are the ones who have to stop being unspoken and come up and say, this is me. Even sometimes when it's some uncomfortable situation, because maybe with that uncomfortable situation, you will move other people to start thinking a little bit more about what's going on in the life of refugees. So that's how I decided one day and just came to them and say, okay, I would like to be part of it. Let's do it. So.
And how do you feel about the end result?
how I feel about.
Do you like the film?
I love the, well, I will, it's hard to talk about the film because how many of you saw the film? Nobody. So it's really hard to, you know, in order to really understand what was the story behind, you really have to see it and watch the movie and see dynamic and see the stories and see the human stories. It was not a movie about statistics and book stuff about immigration or refugee or whatever. It's about human stories, the real life people and real life situations. So I will really recommend everybody to watch the movie. And I'm pretty sure that it will be organized in the future
I hope so.
again, so.
Yeah.
Something. You know, I would like to say that the clips that you did showed really resonated with me, and I think you did a great job. I didn't get to see the full film because like the days that they showed it, I was at work, but I did want to see it myself. So I'm primarily planning on, you know, seeing that soon. But I think to kind of go on her point, and I can't speak on the lady's perspective, but I could speak on, I guess, my perspective, my parents' perspective. You know, coming to America, we truly are, we have so many opportunities to do things here. And when she said that she's happy to give her birth here, I think she meant it because, you know, I'm just thinking from my parents' perspective, if I was born in America, they're probably a lot more happier because there's so much more opportunities being a natural born citizen than, you know, earning our citizen, if that makes sense. And I think that's one of her reasons why she can be happy about that. And I think the film did a great job on doing that, showing the refugees' perspective of just, you know, working hard, being grateful.
I think I want to say just one thing, sorry. I think that she will say that she is happy because she has no other choice. She is not in, she probably screams inside, I want to deliver this baby in my hood, mud hood, and have happiest baby and happiest mom in the moment. But that's not my reality in this moment. So.
Hi, again. I really just want to say that I really appreciate your humility about this as a filmmaker, because I think it's easy to think that, you know, you're doing a good thing and you're promoting the wider good for everyone, but also to recognize, like you have been, that it's complicated, and you know that there's always the threat of arrogance here. I wanted to ask you separate on another issue, which is one of the things we're exploring in this conference is the issue of mental health. And Cheryl was really great in talking about how the experience of learning to tell a story and then actually telling a story, it seems to me, I mean, Cheryl left it to us to infer this, but it seems is a really empowering experience for storytellers. And you never actually addressed this, Cheryl, but yeah. Yeah, and I guess is a good thing for people's mental health. So I want to ask you about, as a filmmaker, in talking to people and interviewing them on the film, and when you made the film, do you think that that was an empowering experience for them?
I don't know.
Or can you talk about how you think it addressed any issues of mental health that they might have, anxiety, all of these things?
So one of the things I did was I talked to this organization, Refugees International, and they had actually just conducted a study on messaging around refugees. And they warned us away from two things. One is what they call trauma porn, like don't get too into the trauma and don't hit too hard on the economic angle. And I really tried to keep those things in balance. They said, oh, we understand those have to be mentioned. Like a lot of Americans don't understand, like you really do want to understand that a lot of refugees don't want to be here. And it's like this Burmese family where I'm co-directing with a Burmese photojournalist in Western Pennsylvania. He's very clear. I would go back in a second if all things being equal. And it's really interesting to work with him. But I think, like for Tatjana, yes, I think it was empowering for her. I'm going to speak for you right now. What do you think? I think, you know, she knows what she's well aware, and she came to us because she felt like, I want to tell the story. But I don't know about Nasruddin. Like, I don't think he really can see things in that way as much. And So I do have to just kind of keep checking the philosophical underpinnings of what I'm doing, and the fact that I want to tell a story that will have enough resonance to actually be seen. Because if you make a film on an issue like this and nobody sees it, you've done nothing. So, you know, I'm trying to balance all these elements, and I'm aware that not every choice is perfect. So that's the best I can offer.
So just because you mentioned, yeah, I will say deeply storytelling in your is deeply helpful for mental health. In fact, when I finished my play and I walked off stage, my brother went up to the director and he goes, "She's been in therapy for 4 years. This is the thing that made her better." And it's fully, absolutely true. No questions asked. And I agree with you completely about what type of stories we're helping people tell. You're supposed to tell from the scar, not the wound. And so like, if you're not through the story, if you can't make meaning of the difficult thing you went through, it's not a story you're ready to share with somebody. So I'm really glad that you also agree with that as well. I'll just want to say one thing to the woman from Utica, and I really appreciated your comment about like, what stories are we telling? What I go back to personally is issue versus identity, right? You should tell a story about lead in Utica. Like that actually happened in Lewiston too. And what made the difference is when both communities, locals and newcomers, were telling the story of lead, they got a huge grant to solve lead. But because the Somalis hadn't been there before, there wasn't enough voices out there screaming about it. So that's where I come from. What are the issues we share?
I got to be fair, I'm not sure I thought as deeply about that, but I have had the experience. I've traveled the world shooting films for the UN, and I have had the direct experience of people unburdening themselves to me on camera, and that nobody had ever listened to them before with any respect. And boy, these were powerful experiences, like child soldiers and girls who had had acid thrown in their faces and things like that. It was just kind of unbelievable for me. But
that point when she said, "I'm really happy," for me, I felt like she was really scared. And since they're really new, we're forgetting that there's a difference between someone who's been here 20 years or 10 months. And I remember I wasn't a refugee, but as someone who's new in a country, you're really scared. You live few years of fear. And it was very obvious between his experience, her experience. So she's saying she's happy because she's a mother that's happy to have a safe place for her child. But I think there's a lot of fear in her face, and both of them, that I'm sure, I mean, I want to see the movie. But how did you feel about that? Were they?
well, a lot of it is not on camera, but she's super happy now. Like, she got her driver's license, she's working, you know, she has just a ton more agency in her own life at this point. So I think for her, seeing the movie is not painful for her, even though she may recognize that wasn't the truth for her at that moment, but it is true now. And so it's funny because in getting more agency, she was also like, "No, we're not shooting," you know? So I have a poster without her on it, the rest of the family, but not her, you know, because she doesn't want to be in that way. So, you know, I think, but she's always happy to see me, you know. She really, you know, we have a good relationship. So it's I don't know, it's nuanced, but I would say, you know, part of her agency is saying no to things like filming. So,
but can I say something? For refugees, when we are arriving, there is a lots of trauma, lots of loss, lots of pain. So it takes a time. Okay, it takes a time. It's so interesting. 23 years ago was me, the one, but now since then I'm working with the refugees at the Refugee Resettlement Agency, and it became kind of mission for me, not just job, but mission. And I have chance. I feel so happy that I have a chance to see those, especially women, men's too, but women, single mothers. Oh my God, when you see them with the pain and with the fear and so helpless and all of that, and after a year, 2 years, you see the progress in many of them, in most of them, as they are healing and as they are getting some services, as they are starting to open, as they are starting to get economically, starting to make get their own income, to putting kids in the school, feeling more secure in the country. At the same time, they are healing through that process. I know many Somali women, Somali moms who have lots of kids who came with the tears. Husband is left over there and all of that. They get the job. They started learning English. They get the job. They put the kids through the school. They're driving a car. After several years, they come to office. You can feel different. You see the different face. You can sense that there is a difference between the person who, when they arrived and through the years, through the healing process.
You actually said that in the film, Tatjana, about yourself.
About myself, I
Yeah.
can tell you because I was.
Keep the mic up. Keep the mic up.
Traumatized. I was the.
You got to keep the
war
mic,
survivor.
Tatjana.
I was war survivor. I was domestic violence survivor. So I know very well from the first hand how it looked like. And I appreciate moment when I came to be okay with myself and say, I'm ready to say this in front of the people. My own experience about domestic violence survivor. I can come in front of the people and tell my own story without regret, without tears, without nothing, but as a person who survived and who moved forward. It's so powerful. I felt that I can move the mountains as a mother, as a woman, as a survivor.
So one of the things Tatjana says in the film that I really liked is that in Bosnia, you would have a whole family around you to help you raise your child and keep the traditional customs of the culture and things like that. And that in losing that, she saw her own power. And I think there's something to that, but I also think this is what I would really say that the film is ultimately about, is that refugees are bringing some very serious things that we lack, like a sense of community that's a lot stronger than what we have here, and a sense of family. And I like that subtlety, is like we've got to clue into this great gift that we're getting in these people, because they bring their own cultures here, not because they assimilate, but because they bring who they are. So that's always been an important part for me.
Yeah, so I have a quick question. So I'm a researcher. I do research with refugees in towns. And to do research, we have to go through the IRB board, like a whole ethics committee. And so I'm curious if you guys did any ethics or reviewed any ethics before filming, or if you recommend just documentarians in general go through a process like that before to make sure that the participants are being hurt in any way. And then also, I'm just genuinely curious, how many days did you spend in Utica before you began filming?
Not very many. We spent not very many. We were mostly shooting scenics though in the beginning, and not people so much. But we met Nasruddin and his family at the airport. So what we knew was that there's a lot of data that says that refugee resettlement's done really well in Utica, but we were taking a flyer on any given family that we were shooting that they would bear out this greater truth or not. So we shot them for 2.5 years. I majored in philosophy in college. I don't know what to tell you. No, I didn't take a course, but I really took a lot of guidance from people at the center on how to do this. And I don't put a narrator in my films. I let people speak for themselves. I'm always trying to get people to talk. It's my natural bent. I don't know. I just kind of trust myself in some way. And that may not sound sufficient, but it's the best I can offer.
I'm sorry if I totally missed this, but where can we see this film? I would really like to see it.
Right now, that's kind of tricky. I'm just going to colleges. We are showing at Colgate on April 8th. We're showing at Hamilton College on the 10th. We're trying to arrange a second screening at the Stanley Theater in Utica. So we're working on that. It's been tough. It's not apparently it's not that sexy a film for the general public. So this is a battle to get this stuff out there. Yeah, I mean, that's why, to address some of the questions about entertainment value, you're competing against Marvel comic movies and things like that. So you have to try to make something that has some value to it in the entertainment way. And it's very hard to communicate. I think there's a ghetto that films get put in. If you're seem to be an issue-based film, they think it's going to be a boring essay of a film. And I don't think this film is that, but that's what people think. And how do I market it? I don't know. I'm not a master of that.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to share a few points that I think are really kind of underscoring why we brought together the Arts Festival. And one is that art is inherently subjective. That's what makes it politically salient to all of these conversations. So I really appreciate that you have shared this perspective with us, because I think the second point is that there is power in every story, that the stories that you're showing us with these families, there's power in that and it deserves to be shown. And the third point is just that there is also, on the flip side of that, I think, as we're seeing in this conversation, the danger of a single story. And that's what really underscores why we believe an arts festival with RIT is so important, because there needs to continue to be spaces for these stories to be told and for refugees to be able to share and express their experiences through that. So I really appreciate the humility and that you've come to this event with, and for showing us just how powerful the stories that you've been able to show are, because I think both can be true at the same time, and that is what we're really hoping to bring together here at the Arts Festival. So I just wanted to share that, and thank you for being here.
Well, I appreciate that the academic and, obviously the things that Chris does at MUC, and I appreciate the academic studies on forced migration and all these things. I mean, you guys are much more deeply in this than I am. I am just trying to interpret, and I am really trying to show what really draws me to this story is this idea of a systematized kindness at the end of the day. Like, this is an organization, the Refugee Center, that knows what this population needs, tries to give it to them as much as possible, but also lets them be the individuals that they are and have their own idiosyncratic needs and respond accordingly. And I just think there's a lot of people that want to do this kind of work. We should be paying them to do this work, because we can make life better for a lot of people. The ex-con population, the homeless population, there's a lot of populations out there that need this sort of attention, and we should be doing it. And I've done a lot of org work in my life, and that's what inspired this movie. The only thing I don't like about orgs, for the most part, is their communications people. I think they suck. So I said, I got to make my own film, because I want to show the nuances. I don't want to have the executive director in there unless it makes sense. I don't want to have a celebrity talking about this thing unless I want to see how it works. And this film is really gets down in the weeds a lot about it. And I've actually shown you some scenes that are sort of questionable to me, like that scene with Nada in the doctor's office, because I wanted to sort of hear what you guys had to say about it. I don't know if we're done here, or I can show another scene. Kick a mic, Max.
There's a possibility the film will be shown in Emerson, right? And do you have a way to let people here know if it is shown in the area?
Everybody should go to our website, sign up for their mailing list, and then we'll keep people apprised of what's going on. I mean, and it looks good for us. I'm in this as an activist. I'm basically just saying we should be ramping up refugee resettlement in the United States for any number of reasons. So I'm out here trying to do that. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm get the president to increase the number, and if possible, I would increase funding too. So both of those things, just like there's plenty of reasons that I ask all the experts, and I challenge you guys, the academics on this. What's the number? What should the number be? Like, we should know what we're for. And I've been running around with like at least 250,000. That's what I would say. This is a really uncomplicated form of immigration. We have the chance to vet the crap out of people. It's kind of harsh, but it really works. So why aren't we doing this? I have no idea, so that's what I'm doing. I'm just trying to get something accomplished. And I would appreciate as much. It really looks good for us to have followers on Facebook, on Twitter. I'm not really good at any of that stuff, but we have a young girl who's overseeing our Instagram, and she's pretty cool. So, it's just any place we can get followers so we look like we're starting to amass an army. And I have postcards with me from ECAR, which is a really cool organization, which is Every Campus a Refuge. And what they're trying to do is have colleges offer up some of their substantial real estate to house refugees for the first 3 to 6 months they're here, and let them avail themselves of the facilities on campus. It could be a really interesting opportunity for schools to do this. So we're trying to, align with different organizations and help stuff happen for them.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a good place to stop. We are out of time, but we want to thank you very much for being here and sharing your experiences and your documentary clips. And if you are available for follow-up questions after, we encourage those of you to ask additional questions if you have them. But again, we thank you very much for being here. And with that, we're going to break for lunch. We do have meals provided. If you could follow COVID protocols, wear a mask when you're not eating. We would appreciate it, but we'll be back for our final workshop before our closing ceremonies. So please stick around. And again, thank you so much.
Thanks everybody for coming, and thanks for your engagement on this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.